Welcome to Turning Pages with Mel. Here we dive into the transformative power of books and honest conversations. Ever feel like you're stuck on the same page of life? Trust me, we've all been there. But every book and every life has a new chapter just waiting to be written. I'm on a mission to help more people heal through reading and taking bold, actionable steps in their lives. Today, I'm thrilled to have a special guest who embodies this mission perfectly, Gillian Shields. We're talking about the topic that's close to our heart, love. Romantic love, to be precise. It's something we all crave, yet many of us feel stuck trying to find it. Maybe it's not us. Maybe it's our approach that needs a tweak. Gillian is here to share wisdom from her book, The Dating Pattern Cure. She studied psychology and human behavior extensively, earning both a bachelor and master's of science. Plus, she delved into the soul and spirituality principles for over a decade. Gillian's own journey from heartbreak to thriving in love is nothing short of inspiring. She's also the host of her own podcast, So This Is Love. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. Your support means the world to me and helps this podcast reach even more people. Thanks. Right. Okay. Thank you, Gillian Shields, for joining the podcast.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
Right. And you are the author of The Dating Pattern Cure, and you have a new book called
Happy Boundaries.
Right. Okay. So we're here to get some insight on the love mindset, how we can navigate this, even being solo on our own, how we can navigate this while also being open-minded to attracting a partner. So I wanted to ask you about the book, The Dating Pattern Cure. How did you come up with the concept?
Oh my gosh, I feel like it was a story in the making. So how I even got to the point where I wrote the book and where I actually started helping people in this field is I went through like a decade of my own turmoil with love life, a lot of unhealthy relationship patterns. I ended up in unhealthy relationships, some abusive relationships, and I just kind of hit this point of kind of a rock bottom where I just was really tired of all that. And I was always really interested in relationships since I was really young. Like, I'm talking like a teenager. I was always like fascinated by love, probably because I didn't have positive modeling for love relationships. So it almost became this like really big interest I had. Like I kind of wanted to know like what is that and how do people get that because I don't see that in my home, and in my life. And it just ended up being something I was really interested in learning about. So I did university, I studied relationship psychology, and I was going to be a couples and family therapist. That was like my dream job at the time. But I was such a mess, like internally. I had like no self-worth, no self-confidence. I went through all of this schooling, and right before I was going to start that part of my career, to do like further education on that, I didn't do it. I just didn't do it. And then I was like, I can't do this. Who am I to teach anybody about relationships? Like, I don't have it together in my life. I knew there were certain things from my education that were really important to healthy relationships, such as a healthy self-concept, which I definitely did not have. So I definitely didn't feel like I was in the position to do that. So I pursued a different area in my career, and I just kind of went on with my life and had a bunch of, really traumatizing relationship experiences. I'll just put it that way. I had some relationship trauma over about a decade. And then my last breakup, I guess I would say, and it wasn't even like the worst relationship I was in. It wasn't even the worst one. And I just had, looking back, it was my last breakup. And something had just clicked where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be with people like this. I can't, I, I really wanted a good love relationship. It was one of like my biggest goals in life. Like, it really was. And I think anyone who has had a string of really difficult or hard or horrible relationships, or relationship experiences, you do really want to not have that anymore. Um, and you want to have a really good, loving relationship, you know? And this was something I really, really wanted. And for some reason, after that breakup, I was just like, I really want to work on this. You know, I really want to work on this. And just having that small inquiry with myself, which actually happened as soon as my ex walked out the door. It was so crazy. It was like he left, it didn't end well. And then I found myself like alone in my apartment being like, okay, and I started having all of these awarenesses that never really came before. I don't know how it happened. Like, I looking back on it, I'm like, it was like divine intervention because I was asking, you know, source, God, universe for this. Like, I had this dream and it did um start getting answered by that relationship ending, you know. And I just started having this awareness like, what if this has something to do with me, like my choices, my patterns, how I see love in relationships, how I see myself in relation to that, how I see myself, period. And I just had this really big realization that I knew what I wanted, but I did not believe I was capable of having it. Like, and I never had that awareness before up until that point, um, where I was like, oh my God, I don't think I'm worthy. Like, that's what it was. And and honestly, from that day on, I just had this insane drive and motivation to just figure it out, you know, to start really looking at what was going on in my inner world when it came to love, relationships, dating. And I uncovered a lot quickly. um, so after having all of this education about human behavior and the human mind and relationships, I took that, but then I went further. So then I started learning about like energy, manifestation, spirituality, um, mindset, self-love, like looking at it, how do I actually put self-love into action, you know, and really w- getting at it from a different level. I started learning about like our soul and how our soul chooses specific situations before we come into our life and how we can learn from that. And I really went deep into mindset work. So the interesting part is that even though at that point, like my goal was to turn around my love life, I had other goals too, but that was one of my top priorities. I actually did not read any relationship books, like at all. Um, I I knew what I knew from my education, and then I just went into just general personal work, like I said, like spirituality and manifestation and energy and mindset, and looking at how we can transform our life from our inner world. That was really what I began to study. Um, and then I applied that to my love life, which then is the book, basically. And I didn't write the book right away, obviously. Like, I actually completely changed my love life, completely changed my life, to be honest. After that last breakup, I met my husband like 6 months later. Seriously, it happened in like 6 months. I'm not saying it's that fast for everybody, but it was just my time, I guess, you know, because I was really ready and I was very, very open. Like, I can honestly say that I had let go of every disempowering belief and inner perspective and fear and all of this, everything from the past. I truly let go of all of that and fundamentally actually loved myself, had self-worth from a very healthy place. It wasn't like an egotistical place. It was very like, I truly believe that I'm worthy of this kind of relationship now, you know? And then it was crazy. Once I hit that spot internally, it's like it just happened. It just happened. And it happened in a way like I didn't predict. It just honestly came out of nowhere. Um, which I'll talk about that in a second about how do we actually start doing this, and letting go of the franticness and the stress and all this. Um, Go ahead. You look like you're about
Yeah,
to
yeah.
ask something.
Did you have a aha moment when you sort of got into that self-acceptance and be like, I am enough. I am worthy of love. Did you find yourself having like a aha moment? Like, oh my gosh, like I did it, or it just naturally because of the work that you did, it didn't feel like something new?
Yeah, so when I first started doing the work, I didn't believe that I was enough. It was the first epiphany was realizing that my inner belief was that I was not good enough for the type of love I wanted. And that actually brought a lot of sadness. I was very sad for myself. I almost like had an out of body experience where I was like, where it I was sad for myself that I felt that about me. It was it was a type of sadness I don't think I ever felt at that point to that degree, or at least not being aware that that's what it really was. And then the time where I had this aha moment where I'm like, I am worthy of this, it wasn't like this one thing. It was, and I say this a lot when I talk about this, it's never just this one thing. It's something that you build over time. And it was this point where all of a sudden I noticed I carried a feeling that I didn't feel before, and that's, you know, that was the epiphany where I was just like, wow, I actually feel differently. Like I believe and feel differently now than I did before about myself, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does, but did you, when you felt differently, did the outside, because I know sometimes what happens, we're humans and we try to rush the process. So
Mm-hmm.
we might be doing the self-love work, doing the mindset work, but then outside's not changing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the outer world is not changing, and that kind of like makes us kind of go back into like question, like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yep, totally. So the outside did start to change. It did. But obviously not right away, right? So, and I did have those moments where things weren't changing yet, and I was feeling doubtful. I was like, am I going to be able to do this? Like, am I actually going to be able to create change in my life? And um, I started to feel some hopelessness here and there. It comes up. So what I did during those times is I I just went back. I went back to what I was working on. Like I just constantly went back. I never let myself linger in this sense of hopelessness and this sense of like, this is never going to work. I can't do this. I never let myself stay in there for very long. I noticed it, I accepted it, and then I was like, turn your focus. Like, come back to what you're focusing on, come back to loving yourself, what you've learned, continuing to believe and expand yourself to receive what you actually want in a love relationship. And it was like a pivot. I just kept pivoting every time, you know? The other thing that I did, and I talk about this in the book too, is like I really used that as an opportunity to develop my trust in myself and in like God, universe, source, and knew that it was going to be delivered to me as I did this. So it was literally like pivot, into what I was focused on, pivot back into trust. And part of that work is trusting the universe, source, God in the first place, is like, and that's hard to do when you've had so many experiences where you don't feel like that power has your back. Like for real, this is like an actual experience that people have that, again, I don't think people really talk about it. People will be like, oh, yeah, you know, I believe in God, I believe in source and universe, but like deep down, you actually don't fully believe that it can come through for you. And that was something that I noticed in myself that I worked on how to develop that belief. And I developed that by belief by coming back to what I know are universal energetic principles that if we step into this, if we do our part and step into the mindset and the state of being, it must be delivered, number one. And number two, realizing that my soul is loved by God, universe, source. So again, like changing my point of view of what that kind of love really is. It's not human, right? Like we're so used to love being conditional or love being based on how some other person treated us. But we have to realize like that's not what we're dealing with when we're dealing with the universe. And that was big too, So that's what I did in those moments.
Yeah, it's really strange that you mentioned that because my trainer messaged me today. We were talking about God, and
Mhm.
I was telling him, I said, I think one of the biggest problems I think people have right now is actually trusting God. Like we say it,
Yeah.
right? We say that we pray, we say that we do these things, but then when we have issues, we feel like, oh no, there's like we don't put our trust
Yeah.
in yeah,
Yeah.
in our creator. So it's weird that you mentioned that because I like we just had that conversation today.
And
Yeah.
that's like, Melissa, that's like a whole other conversation about
Yeah.
like how do you actually do that? And like we can talk about that another
Yeah.
time, but
Yeah.
that's a whole other thing is like how do you actually truly trust in
Yeah.
that? And I did a number of things. And again, like I want to reiterate, like all of this is such a practice, and I really think it's important for people to know that if it doesn't happen instantly, you're not you're not wrong, you're not doing it, you're not doing a good enough job. It's not that. It's just that it truly is a practice. When you are so used to living in a certain mindset and a certain pattern in relationship choices and behaviors for decades, it's going to take time. Like you're trying to overturn long-standing habitual ways of looking at dating, love, in this case, men, you and I are heterosexual,
Right.
or whatever, or your past. Um, it's so deeply ingrained that it's really important that we give ourselves like grace and space to allow ourselves to change, right? Um, so yeah, so all of that happened. And then I, met my husband. It was the first relationship where like there was no drama. Like it was very weird at first. I'm like, I'm used to a lot of drama. There was no drama. It was very easy. I still had things come up at the beginning of the relationship where some of my old anxieties were coming up and some of my old like ways of dealing with um my own insecurities would come up, but I was with somebody who was able to witness me in that and knew I was doing my part and knew I was really like I cared about changing and I cared about healing. I cared about the relationship and was very, supportive and like forgiving during that time. It didn't happen much, but things did come up. And I just noticed it right away. And I was like, well, I'm changing. I'm learning. Like, again, I'm turning around like decades long, ways of looking at relationships, and dealing with relationships like disagreements or whatever change. So, but it was very minimal compared to what I had previously been, because now I was actually with somebody who had like secure attachment and who had a healthy pattern with relationships. So that really helped. And I think that's one of the most important things that you can have in a partner is someone who has healthy, secure attachment or who is at least working towards that is huge. So I was, fortunate in that. And I think a lot of people do have that. Um, but yeah, and then I got married and then I got the idea where I was like, I want to write books and I want to coach people on this stuff. I had so many years of personal experience, both in my own life and in education and my own self-directed learning. Um, and then I wrote the first edition of my book. And then I think 2 years later, I wrote the second edition of the book. Um, but the best way I could describe it is like I did it for myself first, and then the book is where I'm teaching people the main foundations of how I did that. So,
Yeah. The other question I wanted to ask was the shifting our focus.
mm,
What steps can we take to shift our obsession from finding a partner to allowing love to naturally flow?
I love that question. So good. Because it really is an obsession. It really freaking is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because especially when we really want it, when we have this deep desire, to just be happy in love, and share our life with another person in a healthy way, it's like it does become an obsession. And there's really there's multiple things, but I think it comes down to one thing. And you shift from obsession to flow when you are able to internally step into a sense of safety and love within yourself. That's it. Because when you're in a state of obsession or franticness or worry about this, about finding a great partner, having your dream relationship, that's because internally there's something going on, and a lot of this is unconscious. You might not even realize it if anyone's listening and feeling this, but there's a part of you that feels like you are not enough. What you have right now, where you're at right now, isn't enough, that there truly is something missing from you, and that's the root of that, really. And there isn't a sense of safety and stability literally within your own being. Thus, there is this need that creates that franticness to be able to find somebody else, right? So there's a place you can be in where you're holding that desire, but you're also holding a state of being that is really a sense of safety and love, where you are able to dispel doubts when it comes to whether this happens. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Okay. Wait, there was something that came to my mind when you were talking about so there is a difference in mindset, obviously, because some people might get into the mindset of like, okay, I'm not going to be obsessed over love, but then they would like, oh no, screw it.
Yes.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
So they get
I'm so happy
bitter.
you said that.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you said that. Yes. Okay. So this is the thing that happens is like, if we're not obsessed about it, then we become anti-relationship, right? Become anti-relationship and we're just like, screw it. I don't need anybody, blah, 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 which actually is not a true reflection of what you want. The anti-relationship play is a self-protective play. That's all it is. Because you don't want to be disappointed. You think you can handle more disappointment, and that's really it. You just internally on an unconscious level do not believe that you are going to be okay if you truly put your investment in this dream that you have, and going with it. um and the anti-relationship is not the answer, right? Unless it's actually what you want. Like some people, when they go through stuff like this, they may realize actually like a love relationship is not truly, it's not on my priority list. But I'm not making that decision from a place of anger and to protect myself from being hurt, from being disappointed, or because I feel like deep down I actually think it's not possible, right? So you make that decision if you are, but I think it's right for you when you make it from that decision where it's from a place of true peace when you don't have that dream, or that desire.
Do you think that happens with like mostly as women are aging, that we tend to have that mindset where we're like, okay, no, forget it, and we don't want to
Yeah.
because yeah, with women
So I
like,
think
go
Yeah, I
ahead.
think that I think that happens for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have again, so much of this goes on what we actually believe about ourselves and what we are currently believing about dating and relationships and the potential of that. Like that's what this comes down to, right? So as people age, this is just what I hear, I this is from personal experience and also as I've worked with clients is like the older I get, the harder it is because people are just like I see there's just a loss of hope. They think like, oh, there's no good ones left out there. The dating pool's crap. Like, and these are just internal fears that come up because deep down we think it's going to be too painful. Or some people deep down, they don't actually want to, there isn't a willingness actually to do the inner work, right? There isn't, even though we say, okay, yes, I want this relationship. But then when we're just going anti relationship, that's just on an energetic level being like, I don't want to change. I don't want to like work through this. I don't actually want to do this. And again, that's just a self-protective thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
As I'm on the subject with the, I guess, 35 plus, or as women are
Hmm.
getting older,
Hmm.
today I saw a comment on YouTube, and the guy, he was just basically explaining that women are not, um, like women my age, I'm 41, are not desirable. We're not, so we're going to be picked less,
Hmm.
because they want somebody younger, family, have children, and all these sort of things. And I'm like, well, when you hear that, it's just sort of like it makes you feel sad, but at the same time, I understood where he is coming from. But then if we're out in the dating world and this is what we're facing, I mean, how how do we change our mindset to armor up
Yeah.
for this dating life?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And what I would say to that is that comment is based on that person's opinion. You would
Right.
never friggin' date that person, right? We're looking for evidence from people who we don't want, right? Like we're looking for evidence. We're looking at these random comments on YouTube and social media from whoever, some guy. It's like clearly that guy is not for you. He's for somebody else, right? So it's like we have to have this really wise awareness of what conclusions we're making based on the very limited and small percentage of people that exist in this world and opinion. And fine, that's that guy's opinion, but not every man is like that. In fact, I know many that aren't. So, but we're not even able to open ourselves to that if we've already decided this is the way it is. Do you get what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
you really have to expand. And we talked about, like, very briefly boundaries at the beginning of this, but it's like put boundaries on that. It's like if you know you're going to see that stuff in the comments, like don't read the comments. Like, do what you need to do. I can't emphasize this enough to protect your desire. Okay? Protect your desire. So that means, and again, we talked about this before we even started recording. That means looking at like who are you discussing this stuff with? Are you discussing this stuff with people who are just disempowering what you actually really want and are making it harder for you to actually empower your dream? Like don't stop. Like stop discussing your love life with those people and start discussing it with people who actually believe in love and believe
Yes.
that it's possible and have done what you want to do. and go with that, like that's huge. So boundaries on all levels, it's like that was a really big thing for me, and it continues to be for whatever goal I have, like I've had multiple goals. I have more goals now, and it's like it's my job to really nurture and protect that goal, and that means I need to choose with whom I share it with, and I need to make sure I have people in my life that can support me and that are willing to see that dream with me, Same thing here.
Yeah. Yeah, when I saw his comment, you know, I understood. The thing is, I understood where he was coming from. I it must have been a video that I commented on, or he
Hmm.
had a video or something like that, because it showed up on my my notifications. And when I read his really long response, I was like, okay,
Hmm.
I understood where he was coming from.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, well, this is not my truth. It's not my thing. It's the same thing. Like, someone tells me like all men are cheaters. No, that I don't believe that. It's not
Yeah.
my,
Yeah.
it's not my truth, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, you can understand where anyone's coming from. Like you can see, fine, that's that person's opinion. That's how that person feels, right? That's fine. It's not about like taking it down and being like, oh, well, whatever, saying some kind of comment that condones that or anything, or even rebuts it. It's just like whatever, that's that guy's opinion, and we really have to put that into perspective and not be like, okay, now that means no one is going to want me, because that's exactly what your brain does when we don't even realize that's what's happening unconsciously. But that is what's happening unconsciously if we're not like being diligent, nurturing a supportive mindset, and really being willing to expand past some people's truth and some people's opinion, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about too healing and ex-lovers. What impact does staying fixated on your ex-lover have on your healing process?
You know what? This is such a crazy question that you asked me. Like, you just came up with this question. And it's so funny. When I did my honors bachelor's degree, I did an honors thesis and I studied this very thing. It was fascinating. Um, for my thesis, I actually studied how rumination about an ex impacts your current relationship satisfaction. And of course, there is a correlation that if you are ruminating about an ex, that it correlates to you being less satisfied in your current relationship. So that's the impact. So when you're ruminating and obsessing over an ex, of course, it's going to negatively impact your next relationship if you're still doing that, even if that person it has nothing to do with that new person that you're with, right? Because we go back to, it's what is your internal state, right? Because your internal state is going to dictate your choices, your behaviors, your patterns. This is why it's so important to honestly just work with yourself. You can have all these, what you want in a partner, but like you don't even have to go that far in terms of thinking about how it's going to happen, what you should do and all that. Like leave all that and work on your internal state. And that is just where things, we talked about flow before, where it starts to flow. So that's the impact of your healing, is that it keeps you in the past. It keeps you in the past. And I know it's hard to detach from a past relationship or an ex. It's so easy to overthink everything and ruminate and what if and whatever. Um, but there really is this choice that needs to happen where you really are choosing to move forward, and that means making the difficult and uncomfortable decision often to cut ties or limit ties as much as you can, and focus on what you're working on, focus on what you actually want rather than what was.
Yeah, and I guess also too, that's not fair to the other person you're going into the relationship with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess like the advice that most people do give with when you're healing is like try to heal as much as you can before you enter into the new one.
Yeah.
What was left of the past relationship, before you go in and bleed on someone else and
Yeah,
let them
like
pay for it.
exactly. And like I would say that um two things. Number one is if you are going through a bad breakup or you're still in grief, it's like don't even think about finding somebody right now. Like, just that's not the next step. That's not the next step. The next step is you, right? So it's like, don't even think, you don't even have to think about what you really want in your next relationship. Just focus on stabilizing yourself through grief, going through grief, and working on your inner sense of self, and working on healing from that. And that's all you really need to do at that point. And number two, you said something like, is that fair to the next person if you don't do that and you jump into another relationship? I can tell you 100%. If I happen to have met my husband after I had not, like if I had not done this work, if that were to have happened randomly, there's no way it would have worked out. Why? Because he had a healthy, secure attachment with relationships. I would not have been someone that he would have been interested in because I had so much codependency and I had so much like relationship trauma that I had not worked out. It's like I can tell you right now, it's like it wouldn't have lasted. It wouldn't have lasted, and that goes to show that, and there's countless examples of this. It's like you have to be ready for what you actually want. You have to be able to accept it and you have to be able to receive it. You can't do that if you're reeling from relationship trauma without any action to actually heal, right? Like you just can't. You don't have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, and what I've noticed too is I think everyone, not everyone, but in some instances, when you do go through a bad breakup, it is grieving. And I think we
Hmm.
undermine how much the grieving, it takes a toll on us and our body, our spirit, and our mind. So it does take that time. But like the thing that we want to do is just feel secure again, especially if you have an anxious attachment style. The first thing you want to do is just like, oh no, I need you, I need somebody, I need
Yes.
something, you know? But the grieving process that I realized from my own experiences, it did take a while and I had to allow it to just go through me. I had to
Exactly.
allow my body to feel it. I had to allow to days where I felt like I couldn't get out of bed. And,
Hmm.
it is actually real. And people are like, oh my gosh, like you're acting like this because of a breakup. Or no, I was actually grieving. And a lot of things
Yeah.
came up too with that particular relationship.
And that's the
Um,
thing, like, Mel, I love that you said that because on top of the fact that you're going through grief, it's like when you've gone through relationship trauma, it's like you're hurt. You're emotionally very hurt and you're probably triggered AF. Okay. So on top of that, because think about it, if a person who gets into a really horrible relationship or stays in a really horrible relationship or keeps going back, it's like you already have triggers that you haven't worked through, right? You already have learnings about relationships or love or yourself that you haven't worked through. So when you actually go through a breakup, that all goes haywire, right? So then it's not only grief, but you are so triggered on so many levels because of that loss that it's like a double whammy, right? Which is why it's so important to make sure that the only thing you really need to do is to nurture yourself and to allow yourself to go through that process. Really learning how to regulate your emotions and understand your emotions is super important. um, and then just let it take time if that's the case, like let it take time. We're also afraid of time, not necessary.
yeah, it's true. And then I remember one of our first conversations, and uh, I think then I was just like starting, I was probably 2 years in it, but I was still obviously in a bad relationship or a relationship that wasn't suited for me.
Hmm.
And I remember, I remember you saying something about you have to learn to be alone, right? Because I was saying this rhetoric, I was basically prophesizing that I cannot be alone, like it's humanly impossible.
Hmm.
That, and you're like, no, you know, I learned to love being alone. Like you told me when you did the work on yourself, you learned to love being alone. And I remembered you the other day when I was home alone and stuff like that, and I'm like, this is what she's talking about.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I love it now. I'm like, I love being alone in my own company, in my own space,
Yeah.
creating an atmosphere for myself. But it
Yeah.
took a while. It took a while.
Takes time, and the key and the balance in that is learning to love being alone, but be open to what you actually want in love, not going down that route of anti-relationship unless that is actually what you want, right? And
Mhm.
that's what we were talking about earlier. It's like learning to love being on your own does not equal, well, then I don't need a relationship. You don't need one, but that mentality of like, I don't need a relationship, you know, that like vibe where it's very like you just cut it off and you're done. If that actually makes you feel good, then amazing. But if you know deep down that vibe does not actually align with what you want, it's really important to take peace to know that like loving being alone and feeling safe being alone can actually be really transformational to then being open to a healthy relationship when in the past being alone has felt unsafe to you, because that's what happens, right? When we are not feeling good being alone. So it's not about flipping the other side. It's literally like that is the path to your healing, to have an amazing love relationship, you know?
Yeah. Is it okay to feel that your life is incomplete without the partner?
I don't think we should use the word incomplete. I think
Okay.
it's really important we learn to feel complete in our lives, in our reality. Okay.
Okay.
Like right now, you don't have a partner, or whoever's listening, whoever, don't have a partner, right? But if you are then walking into your life being like, well, my life's not complete because I don't have a partner, like you have to ask yourself, like, what side is that on? Right? What side is that on? That's on the side of like, I'm not enough and there's a problem here, right? That's the thing. You have to be have really good awareness of what from what place you're coming at in this. So you can feel like I would really like that. This is a desire of mine. I want it. But the trick is to have a positive association with that, not a lack association from that, if that makes sense. Um, and how you have a positive association with that really, it really comes down to like one major thing is like you have to train yourself to believe it, to believe that it's possible. Because if you actually believe it's possible while you're by yourself, you're not going to feel that incompleteness. That was one thing that really surprised me when I did my work. Even though I was alone, no prospects in sight. I actually I quit, totally quit online dating. I was like, I'm never online dating again. I literally like, it was the first time in my life where I didn't have this like accessibility to going on dates with people. Like I used to date a lot, just like meet people or whatever. And it was the first time in my life where like I just completely walked away from all of those avenues while remaining open. And it was just this thing where I was like, I had developed a belief that it would happen, like it was without a shadow of a doubt in my mind. So then I wasn't worrying about it, you know, like I wasn't being like, well, I'm incomplete or life's incomplete. It's like I know it's gonna happen. So like I'm not worrying about it, you know? And that was honestly the most powerful energy to be in. And things just started happening. Like I would be approached by all these like amazing men like out of nowhere that would never happen before. And it was just like that's when I started to see how powerful our inner world is. And I had choices, like I had choices and and I had no desire to be anymore with any of the types of people or types of personalities that I had been before. It was just like, to me, that was like, before it's almost like I was attracted to that, when before I was like, there's no way in hell I would do that again, you know? Um, so yeah, so when you have that trust and belief, you don't feel that way anymore. Like you don't feel that like waiting, or you don't feel like your life is potentially incomplete, or you're not worried about it. Um, and that's the place to be, really. And
Yeah.
I teach people how to do that in the book, but yeah.
Okay. Well, when someone's starting their healing journey, for those just beginning, what steps do you recommend? Do you recommend therapy, coaching, maybe both?
Yeah, so I've done both, and it's been at different times in my life. Sometimes I've had both a therapist and a coach at the same time. Sometimes I've had just a therapist, sometimes I've had just a coach. I think you just need to follow what feels right for you. And I don't think there's one way or the other. Like with therapy, obviously people are licensed to um put you through various like research driven techniques, and they can actually say, I'm giving you therapy for like this trauma or like an addiction or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Um, but I really like the balance of working with a therapist, but then also having a coach or a mentor where I choose, where it's like this person has overcome what I want to overcome and I want to learn from them. It's more like I really like mentorship, because it's like there's someone here where I want to be, and mentorship is like they teach you how they got there. It's not so much like coaching where I'm like drawing different things out of the person.
I actually never heard it like that, and I like that concept a lot more. Because I would
Yeah.
always say, like, if you want to be, get into fitness, follow somebody who's into fitness. You want to get
Yes.
married, follow someone who's married, and that. But I've
Yeah.
never heard it with, looking for a coach as opposed to a mentor, which I really like that concept.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
either way is good, but like for example, if I go to a therapist, like the therapist does not need to have personally gone through and overcome what I need help with in order for them to help me, right? They're teaching me specific techniques that are research proven, they're licensed to pull me through, right? Um, so that's a therapist, and it's very effective, especially when you want to talk about like different traumas and stuff like that, and especially if you find someone that you can really connect with. Mentorship can do it. Like obviously in my working with clients, like I have worked with people who have had relationship trauma. Um, but I don't coach or mentor people that it's like I haven't been through what you're been through, or like have the pattern that you're trying to work through. Like I know how that plays out and I know how to help you there. Um, so it just depends. But I would say starting off healing, the first thing you want to do, especially if you've gone through a breakup or you're having trouble disconnecting from your past, is you have to put boundaries. You have to put boundaries on your past. You have to put boundaries on people who are empowering your past and what you want to release. Do you get what I mean there? Like, are they empowering the very thing that you're trying to change? Right? Which could be certain types of perspectives. Could be certain conversation topics. It could be behavioral patterns. Whatever it is, it's like putting boundaries on that is really, really important for your growth. So that for sure. And then I've said it, multiple times during this conversation, but like really just start working on your inner world. Like this is the most important thing. It is hands down the most important factor that will dictate the outcomes in your love life.
In your new book, Boundaries, is the name of the book? I know
It's
it
called
has to do with,
Happy Boundaries.
uh-huh.
Happy Boundaries, how to embrace and honor your choices to thrive.
Do
So
you,
go ahead.
do you cover family boundaries in the book?
Yeah, so it covers
Okay.
relationship boundaries, like boundaries with people, boundaries with like your time, your resources, your boundaries on like your inner world. It also specifically guides you through how to release your own boundary resistant feelings. So, in particular, I talk about fear, guilt, and anger that can come up when we try to set a boundary or when people resist our boundaries. We have to deal with our own things that come up, which is like we feel
Mm.
guilty for having boundaries, or we're afraid of what will happen if we have a boundary, or we're angry about people not liking our boundaries or disrespecting them. So there's a whole section of the book on that. And there's another whole section that helps you really work through experiences with who I call in the book boundary resistors. So these are people who do not like boundaries, probably don't like yours, who may have disrespected or attacked your boundaries, people who just cannot accept boundaries. And this can happen a lot with like people who are emotionally immature or people who are going through their own traumas and they're not healing. Um, it could come from an ex, for example. That's happened to me multiple times where like you don't want to be contacted or whatever, and it's like they don't say no, they don't take no for an answer. Like they cannot deal with the end of the relationship. They're triggered, whatever. So the book is more overarching. It's not just for love relationships. It's on the premise of boundaries and how to deal with situations that call for boundaries, essentially.
Okay. What are, during your healing journey and the process of, writing your books and, going through that breakup to striving and being married, what influential books have inspired you along the way?
Yeah, so when I first started, like into going deeper into personal development in books, really, after I'd gone through my different education, I actually pulled them off my shelf. I have them here. Um, it was very few. It was actually very few, and I never read a book about love relationships at that time. I didn't. So I would say, like I'm talking like classic old school, like Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. Like, hello, that one. I loved this one, Ask and It Is Given, Abraham Hicks. Like, I love this one. This really helped me to look at the energy of thoughts and learning how to change my thoughts about that. Um, and this really helped me to believe in the power that the universe did love me and that I could be answered based on what I wanted, right? So there's that. I really love this one, A Return to Love by
Oh, I love
Marianne.
that one.
This is one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
This was really good for like healing, and just really opening into a mindset of peace. So this I really liked. And then this is like super old cybernetics. This is very old, like it was first written, I think, in the 60s or something, but it's very like brain sciencey and like shows the power of like our own imagination, our own thoughts, and how it actually impacts our behavior. I'm pretty sure he was a psychologist. I honestly don't remember, but I remember being like, I really liked it. This also helped to convince me the power of our own mindset on how our life goes.
I haven't read that one. The
It's
others
very
I
old
have.
school. It's
Yeah.
very old school. If you can get past the old schoolness of it, and that's what I did when I read it. I was like, some of this is like so ancient. It's like very like men and women thing and whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but I really liked some of the messages behind it. And that's what I focused on is like, okay, I want to learn about my mind. I want to learn about how I can change my life using my thoughts and how I perceive things. I want to learn how my mind works. So on a deeper level. So yeah, that was it. I would say those four.
So, how do people get in touch with you? And, well, I think you just told us a little bit about your book, your new release. When
Mhm.
is it coming out?
It's coming out on July 29th, so like a little less than 2 weeks away. And it will be on Kindle, ebook, and paperback. So, yep, that's that. And then my current book, The Dating Pattern Cure, that one's obviously out, also in paperback and ebook.
And Kindle,
And
right?
well, yeah, ebook is Kindle. I
Oh,
mean,
okay, yeah.
yeah, I mean Kindle plus ebook.
Yeah. And how can people get in touch with you? What's your handle on Instagram? I'll put it up on the description below.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Gillian Shields XO. I'm not like super involved all the time on my Instagram. I give mostly to my podcast. And I also have a really awesome email list community, my newsletter called The Conscious Corner. So I give a lot more in those spaces than on other social media. So if people want to go like more deeper with me on things, definitely join the newsletter. I do a monthly thing where I give a monthly message, and it's all focused on how to find love, freedom, and success after difficult relationships, and on self-love and all of that. And then I share my monthly favorites in like in lifestyle and enjoyment. So it could be like books. I share my favorites in personal transformation, which could be just like a technique. It could be a book. It could be whatever. And I share favorites of my memories of that month. So how I live my life and stuff like that. So yeah, and then my podcast, which is called So This Is Love, the podcast. Right now we're on the summer break, but there's 3 seasons, and in the fall I'll be starting season 4. So
Right. I love that name. So this is loud.
me
Yeah.
too. And
Yeah.
what's great about that podcast, it's not just about love relationships. It explores all kinds of facets of love. We talk about like family stuff, self-love, personal growth, and really expanding the idea of love in the context of life and multiple types of relationships and experiences.
And your podcast is available on Spotify.
It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts as well, and it's also on my website. So,
Okay. All
mhm.
right. Great. All right. So thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with us today.
Thank you. This was so fun.
I know.